This event just popped into my memories from 2 years ago today, and I thought it would be worth sharing here. It's one of the scariest encounters that I've ever had, and it definitely taught me to trust my gut. September 4th, 2022. I was at home waiting on my boyfriend to get back. It was getting late, and I was impatient, so I decided to go out and get snacks from the gas station by myself. We lived in a city that really isn't the best place for a then 22-year-old woman to be out alone at night. It's normal to hear gunshots, see cars get stolen. There have been armed robberies at both of the gas stations by my house since I've lived there. Nevertheless, I was hungry and I wanted some snacks, so off into the night I went for them. On my way to the gas station, my boyfriend passed me headed home on his bike when I was nearly there, a detail that is crucial to how things would play out. It was sometime shortly after 11 p.m. that I made it to the 7-Eleven and pulled in by the pump. Before I even had a chance to take my keys out of the ignition, a woman was standing by my passenger side door trying to talk to me through it. Another long story short, before this had happened, my best friend and I had had a couple attempt to carjack us in another city. Ever since then, I've always locked my doors the second I get in my car and had done just that this night. I stayed in my car and told her that I couldn't hear her, so she walked to my side of the car. She said something along the lines of her ride not being able to pick her up because the car broke down and she needed a ride while holding up texts on her phone. I told her, "I'm really sorry, I don't help people at night," and immediately drove away. I was annoyed that I didn't get my snacks, but wrote it off. Just before arriving at my house, I take a left turn and then start down a curving road with a shopping center on the right. The first light on this stretch of roads leads to my neighborhood, where I make another left in. When I took the first left and approached the entrance to the shopping center, a car swerved out in front of me and stayed in the center line the entire way to the light. I kept my distance and pulled in behind them into the turning lane of my neighborhood. When we made the turn though, they stopped next to the curb on the right side of the entrance. This put me in very high alert and I passed them quickly. I'm going to try my best to describe the shape of the area of my neighborhood that this took place in for context. When you pull into the neighborhood, there's a long straight road that has a left-hand turn shortly after the entrance and a right-hand turn further down. Both entrances connected into a loop going around the entire neighborhood, and the straight road that we were on is the main road in and out that connects them. I passed them on the main road and drove down to the second turn to head to my house. When I passed, they started to drive as well and followed me at a distance. Other people pull in behind me all the time, but this just felt different. I passed my parking spot, but took note that my boyfriend was home, making my way through the loop that would lead to another entrance. For a split second, I almost thought I was overreacting and turned around, but as we made our way down the road, I knew I wasn't. As I drove slowly through the loop over the speed bumps that prevent speeding, they got closer and closer to me. Over the last few, they were so close that I couldn't even see the front of their vehicle. After the last bump, there's a small turn with a dumpster, and then a straight to the main road. When we hit the curve, a man was walking to the dumpster and they backed off significantly. I took this as my chance to get away from them. I turned left back towards my house on the main road while yelling to Siri to call my boyfriend. I told him, "Come outside with a gun," and floored it down the main road, blaring my horn the whole way. The car gunned it after me, and I prayed that my boyfriend would come outside in time. I quickly pulled into my spot, still honking, and the car skidded to a stop behind my car at an angle so that I couldn't back out shortly after I parked. Two grown men immediately jumped out of the car while I stayed in mine. They quickly started to approach my doors until they saw that someone was waiting for them. My boyfriend told them that they needed to get back in the car and leave, and not to make a single move near me again. They tried to argue, saying that I had followed them or some other nonsense that I honestly couldn't understand over my sheer panic and adrenaline rush. My boyfriend was ready to stand his ground and do whatever he had to do to protect me, and conveyed that. The men eventually left, and I took my time getting out of the car while still in complete shock. The police were called. They showed up nearly 2 hours later, saying they didn't see the car in the area. I wonder why. They never looked any further into it. Needless to say, my boyfriend was with me every night and would even meet me at the entrance of the neighborhood after work to ride me home for some time later. I often think about what those men would have done if I had turned around or not even thought twice and pulled into my space to begin with. Would they have followed me all the way to the police station if my boyfriend wasn't home? Was that woman a part of it? The whole thing makes me nauseous. I had a feeling for a couple of weeks before this started to keep an extra eye out on cars behind me to make sure I wasn't being followed. A crazy thing to look back on now. It's very scary to think about how things could have ended if I had let that woman in my car or if I didn't have someone to scare them off. To the woman who approached my car and possibly set me up, get wrecked. To the men who followed me home and intended to do God knows what with me, let's definitely never, ever meet again. Hi there. I've told a few of my friends about this story before, and I did get advice about posting it on here by another few, so let's begin. I also apologize as English is not my first language. I was about 13 when this happened, and I lived right down on the beach. If you walked about 1.5 kilometers down the beach from my house, you would get to a place where some of the ocean would be left behind to form a sort of lake. Me and my friends liked to hang out there a lot. Next to the lake were 2 dirt roads. Anyways, I had a German Shepherd, and my mother used to kick me out of the house every weekend for a few hours to go play with the dog, which I did not mind. There was a cliff above the beach, which you could take to walk to the lake that was overlooking the beach, but it was covered in forest. On that day, it was particularly hot, so I chose to spare me and my dog a hot walk and walk up into the forest. I've done this many times before, and I wasn't afraid at all. As I was walking, I hear muffled footsteps behind me. My dog was far up ahead of me off leash, and I quickly realized that someone had to be sneaking up behind me because it was near impossible to walk on the dry foliage silently here. I quickly made a run for the exit of the forest, seemingly hearing the footsteps become audible behind me. No worries though, I was out of the lake now. It was plain, open, and I could already spot a girlfriend of mine there. My dog was already in the water as we went to greet my friend, when we noticed a large man approach us. He must have been close to 2 meters tall and was very slim. He started talking to us both very kindly, and without knowing any better, we were polite to him. At the time, I did not associate the footsteps with this man, but later I grew to. He asked a lot of questions about us, where we were from, if anyone was here with us, and so on, and slowly me and my friend got creeped out. We said our goodbyes, saying that we had to go off to meet our other friends and moved a further distance down the lake. We sat down for a bit and started talking when my dog started to growl. She never used to growl, so it took me by surprise. I looked to see what she was growling at, and lo and behold, the man was standing 50 meters behind us. Me and my friend had caught on now and moved again. Same thing, but he was closer now. We were getting freaked out. We were being followed, and we were all alone. My friend called her mother to come pick us up, though she was at least an hour away, so that meant we were stuck with this creep for an hour, at least. Joy. The more we moved, the more he came closer. I had leashed my dog by now, as she was going completely rabid at this man. Every time we looked back at him, he smiled back, as if we were some sort of close friends. He tailed us for a while until we saw my mother's car arrive at the dirt road. Now, this road was about 200 meters away from us, and to get there, we had to cross where the man was standing. We were terrified. Her mother saw the situation and started running over, which caught the man's attention. And that meant it was our time to dash. I don't think at any time in my life have I ever run that fast. My dog was running with us as I let her leash go, and when we got to the car, we hastily jumped in while the man ran towards us. We stayed in the car and my friend's mother called 112 and waited inside there while the man started throwing rocks and wailing at us, eventually running off as the police arrived. When the police did arrive, they questioned everyone and went to look for the man but never found him. I'm still terrified he's in that forest, waiting for me. I didn't know that day that my friend would be there, and I don't know what would have happened if she wasn't. I didn't have a phone or any form of contact, and I'm pretty sure if he would have gotten me, he could have won against my dog. So to the creepy man who stalked me and tried to catch me and my friend, let's not meet again. Okay, so I'm not sure if this belongs here or somewhere else, but I want people to learn from my mistakes. For context, when this happened, I was 17. I am now 18. This was right before my birthday. I was on a lot of apps that help me make friends as I'm autistic and I struggle to make friends in real life. I'm femme and non-binary and also asexual, so because of the nature of these apps, I stated that I was asexual on my bio. I also stated other things like my interests. I met this one guy who lived like an hour away, and I was looking for a friend to smoke with, and he said he would. I know, I was very naive. Nonetheless, we planned a time, and I waited outside for him. He brought me a breeze, and we took turns hitting his cart. We had very meaningful and deep conversations. We immediately just clicked, which I thought was amazing. Well, until a bit later, when I got very high because I'm impulsive and I don't know my limits well. It was getting very cold, and I told him I should get back inside. He agreed and started to walk me towards my window. I was stumbling and unable to see straight. Once in my driveway, he asked for a hug before he left, and me, thinking it was kinda cute, I did give him a hug. The next thing I know, he was behind me. He had a knife to my neck. At first, I tried to fight back, but I realized it was getting me nowhere. Fighting back even severely hurt me. In the heat of the moment, I thought I was going to become just another true crime murder story, so I started listening to him. I was hoping he'd spare my life, but at the same time I was trying to leave as much evidence as possible, just in case listening didn't get me out of it. And it didn't. Then I saw the scars on his thighs. I managed to appeal to some sort of humanity he had in him. My exact words were, "I saw your scars. You're just like me. You're hurting, but this isn't going to stop the hurt. Only temporarily soothe it." I don't know how I was able to think so logically in such a panicked state, but it ended up being what saved me. He ended up letting me go only if I agreed to meet up with him again. So I agreed, and I went inside and tended to my cut. After that, I blocked him on everything and kept his chats in my phone just in case I was ever brave enough to go to the police. I obviously didn't meet up with him again, and I never will. But what scares me the most is how much we had in common with our mentality and personality. It's scary. I know predators like this often say stuff they don't mean, but our deep conversations felt real. Please listen to my advice, and don't meet up with someone from online. It was autumn in 2015. I was 23 years old. I'm now 31. During that time, I lived in Lancaster as I was studying at Lancaster University. For those who may not be familiar, Lancaster is a small and rather quaint town in the north of England. As a student, you could either live at the university campus or in private accommodation in the town. I had decided to live in a newly built, renovated apartment on the nice side of town, and yes, it was expensive. I had already been studying for 2 years and had reached my 3rd year. By this time, I had grown accustomed to the layout of the town and felt comfortable and safe living there semi-independently, with 2 other friends who were also studying at the same university. Since my 1st year, I had decided to improve my fitness by taking nightly runs around either the campus or the town. As we were living in the town center by my 3rd year, I would run either with my housemate or alone. The important thing to note about Lancaster, and this will be important later, is that it has quite a large residential area that is hilly and far removed from the bustling center, which at that time was a hub for the students and local northern folk, probably drinking in pubs or eating pies. Occasionally, I would run with my housemate. However, I preferred to run alone and listen to some kind of heavy metal. A big fan of the Deftones during that period. On this particular day, as I said, a chilly autumnal evening, I had to run alone. It was about 8 p.m. and I had my earphones in. I started to run up the more isolated district that led to a very pretty residential area and a large green called Williamson Park. It had a butterfly museum at the top of the hill. Next to the park was a very large graveyard, the kind that's miles wide and had different areas. Large yew trees, crumbling graves, a crypt in the center overrun with leaves and ivy. But what was especially creepy about this particular cemetery was that it had the ruin of an old mental asylum or a hospital at the other end. You could actually sneak in if you walked across the width of the cemetery and crawled through a small hole in the fence that led to the asylum grounds. This was not advised though, as guard dogs roamed the derelict building. It was not a place you wanted to be during the night. So I had made my way past Williamson Park and up to the entrance of the graveyard. Immediately, my eye was drawn to something small standing at the imposing gates of the graveyard. They were kind of tall, black iron gates that were at the bottom of the winding path. I felt a little apprehensive, but it wasn't unusual to see people walking their dogs, etc., out of the graveyard, so I started to slow my pace and walk in the direction of the shape. As I drew nearer, I realized that the shape was a child about 9 or 10 years old, and they were running towards me frantically. They looked panicked and scared. I think they were crying. I vividly remember that the girl was not wearing a coat, only a thin dress that would not be suitable for the harsh Lancastrian autumn. She asked me if I could help her. She was desperate and seemed to be frightened of something. She kept looking back into the graveyard, which at this point was totally pitch black beyond the gates. I mean, there was absolutely no light beyond this path. As the graveyard was quite large, it was chilling to see the depth of the blackness and the vulnerable child standing at the mouth of the gate, helpless. I don't recall what the girl said exactly, but I then offered to call the local police. I had typed 999 into my phone and had it on the loudspeaker. The girl immediately changed. She was not happy about the fact that I was calling the police, that was clear. She stopped crying, and she seemed angry, almost demanding, and insisted that she did not need the police to help. I reassured her that it was best to inform the police, even offered to walk her to the station, which was about 20 minutes back down the hill. And this is where the story gets weird and a little terrifying. The girl turned and ran back into the graveyard. She ran directly through the gates into the eerie blackness, and she didn't come back. She just ran as quickly as possible until she had completely disappeared. It was totally silent. I was spooked beyond belief, now standing in the darkened street completely alone. I had so many questions. Who was that girl? Why was she alone? Why was she scared of the police? Why wasn't she frightened of the dark? Who might she be running to? Or from? I turned and I ran all the way back down the hill, not stopping until I had reached a well-lit, built-up area. Safe to say, I didn't run on my own again at night. Anyway, it's a mystery that has plagued me ever since. Little girl in the graveyard, let's definitely not meet again.